What the FF7 remake could be. What's good, guys? In 2015, when Square Enix announced that they would be attempting a Final Fantasy VII Remake, just taking you back to that moment. So for me, I just remember screaming. I was ecstatic like nothing else. 10 years of petitioning and just being that random dude who argued with strangers all day on the internet whether a 7 remake was unviable, viable, or whether it could or should happen. And in fact, even the night before the E3 of 2015, I made a post daring to get my hopes up for the 10th year running that it was randomly going to happen. Even after Square themselves had said they would not do a 7 remake until another Final Fantasy did as well. So the fact that by this E3 of 2015, 15 itself hadn't even come out at this point, the odds of it coming looked none too slim. But then it happened. And oh, it still gives me shivers to this day, hearing the thousands of other people in that stage and across the world who felt just as passionately as me. Those cheers still echo through me. Now here we are 3 years later, and the majority of that time has gone seeing barely more than a screenshot, and Square Enix, they've done a lot of stuff since then. We've seen more of their capabilities, more of what kind of dev they're becoming. We've watched Nomura direct an entire other game, an entire other franchise, while also supposing to be directing this remake. We've seen external dev cuts, we've seen reports of visual overhauls and changes of the story, waves of new employment, a new co-director, admittance it was announced too soon, and at times, doubts that Square Enix were the company to deliver this experience. Or really any experience above a low to high 7s for the larger gaming audience. That's the Square Enix of today, and that is the reason why it's so easy when thinking about the remake to lose vision of what it could be, of what those of us who wanted it or those who are excited for it now, what it could be, what it can achieve. We've just kind of fallen into this cage of guessing what it will be under this current Square Enix's control, what they will make of it. And the point is, I and many of you guys listening to this, some wanted it long before Square Enix even announced it, before they even set their sights to it, had a dream for what the remake could be, what it could mean, the impact it could return to a whole new generation of gamers, just like it did for us and all of those who gamed around the 90s. And that passion was long there before the announcement trailer, so it's only right that I put my vision where my mouth is. Here is what I think the remake could be. For no smaller way to put it, yeah, a new era. Now, I might sound massively FF7 fanboyish here, and I will likely do so throughout the vid, but I do mean it. Gaming in the recent 2000s has undergone a lot of changes. We've seen unlikely underdogs and genres and devs rise to success. Equally, we've seen JRPGs particularly soar, with many becoming their respective franchises' bestsellers. We've seen some win huge accolades, but we've also seen the fall of many empires. We've seen corruption, unfair practices, scandal-induced mentality shifts among the gamers. We've seen giants fall and the old era status quo challenged. And FF7 Remake now sits at the helm of all of this, of what I feel has been an era shift. So bringing back one of the most iconic titles in RPG history at this juncture point, one that helped in stamping the success of the new PlayStation console back in the 90s, and with it being pretty close to assured that the remake, if not at the very least a part of it, the remake could literally be one of the first titles that either lands on the PS5 or certainly carries across to the PS5. So this is a new generation in every sense that the remake could be leading, and with it constantly polling as most anticipated game, especially on Famitsu. This is a game that the world will play. It already has a pre-existing army of nostalgia-driven fans that has built up for many, many years, all the way over to the ones who are just going to get this remake just to see what the fuss is all about. The legacy and reputation of this game is really just that big. Now, fanboyism aside, almost every gamer worth their salt will be getting this game. And if you do bring a masterpiece remake, if you pull it off on the PS5, Square Enix, your shortcomings, well, they're going to be somewhat wiped in the memory of a new console generation on the PS5, and you will have a hand in shaping a new era. Whether Square Enix have learned the difference between a truly artistically beautiful game and its polygon density. But this is what the remake could be, a visual masterpiece. Now I would be remiss if I didn't mention the facts during this, that it is using Unreal Engine, but even with that, I think it serves that vision fine. FF7 is a game with so much diversity in its towns, monsters, events, and it just screams eye-gasm opportunity at every corner. Namely the live stream, or from parachuting in over the steampunk city of Midgar, imagine it in Unreal Engine glory, to hunting down young sprightly ninjas in the East Asian decor of Wutai. Summons, woo! Especially when Square have increasingly attempted to make more and more of a spectacle of them. Vast ocean of intriguing spell effects the remake could bring to new life. The totally wacky outfits, the even wackier scenes. Ultra realistic would be exhaustive, in my opinion, and unnecessary in trying to carry forward such a wacky, odd game. Unreal can bring that to life. Its capabilities are overexpanding, and KH3 more than demonstrated it can do over the top, and combining that with the remake with its vast variety of instantly recognisable, nostalgia-driven gold mines. This game has at its disposal 20 years of company renditions of characters. Square Enix have done multiple versions, but even just what the fan base have done, there's been millions of even fan-inspired art, song remixes, and new depictions of how towns should look that Square Enix have an ocean of inspiration to tap into. When they're not having to build from the ground up, all they have to focus on is improving on what was already spectacular at birth. This is why I think it could be a visual masterpiece. Even just the legacy of something like the character forms, the forms of Tifa and Cloud and Barret. These characters themselves are almost art at this point. Like, even just their vision, if you was to see a silhouette of it, you can almost recognise it. Tap into that, capitalise. That almost every aspect of this game is instantly recognisable, nostalgia-driven art. And, that's why I kind of want quick switching in the combat system to still be in the game. Make it happen! Make the quick switch fluid and beautiful and juicy. I want to switch between these characters frequently. Shove them under my nose, under my faces. I want close-ups. I want team attacks. I want to see them limit breaks lighting up. I mean, just imagine it for a second. Imagine, say, for example, Tifa's dolphin punch bursting out the ground in a visual spectacle similar to what we've seen in KH3. Like the boat that comes out the void. Imagine that. Or the fireworks just exploding as we're getting the tram ride into the Golden Saucer. Seconds after seeing the haggard, bitter residents of the Mount Coral slums. Something we've seen Unreal Engine we can do, and we have a lot of reason to believe that a lot of what Unreal Engine did in making KH3 look the way it is will find its way over into FF7R. And actually I'm glad, because 7 has many moments that could do with just exaggeration, over the topness. I think the key word here is freedom. When awe-inspiring imagination and creativity, the kind that inspired the golden era of gaming, when that imagination meets the well-honed capabilities of today's technology, Square need not fall into the trap of trying to over-maintain a consistent aesthetic, tone, or theme. Don't try to keep something consistent that simply didn't exist in the original FF7. Because FF7 stood for creative freedom. From dark to just weird. Sea to sky, space and time, multitudes of camera angles, panning, playfulness. FF7 was so much like a child who had been given a whole new box of technology and toys, and just wanted nothing more than to show them off. To experiment what it could do, and it stands to reason that the remake could and arguably should shoot for just as lofty a standard. Start with the rule that when it comes to FF7, there are no rules. So in my opinion, my dear Pezzers, if players don't come away, if we don't, with a sense of a world positively teeming with character, then it would be safe to say the remake didn't achieve what it could have. Because, I mean, just listen to that theme. For those of you like me, that right there, that is the very sound of exploration itself. You know, being swept off my feet with a sense of how much journey lay ahead. I mean, do you remember that feeling you had when you first left Midgar? That kind of gobsmacked at a notion that Midgar was just a small tiny piece of what we still had in store. It inspired a feeling of eagerness, of magnitude, of excitement, and that came not because of a massive pan distance across swathes of open land, you know, boasting how colossally bloated its map size was going to be, while pointing at just a huge void of space and saying, look how open it is. No, it didn't have that sense of grandeur because of that. It had it because of the characters, the relationships and the experience that we'd garnered along the way, and knowing that there was so much left, a grander sense of the richness that still had in store. If it's done right, that is what the remake could inspire. It gives us that freedom of exploration and journey through this entire landscape of beautiful places and experiences, while also still being on the tracks of a linear driven story. Ultimately was what the original FF7 was. It was a linear experience. It is core to the pacing, to the suspense, to the well-timed build-ups. And I really don't think that format should or needs to be disrupted, because a fully remade FF7 could re-spark and bring back a universe that has been long in the making and has expanded to huge amounts. The worlds of FF7 between all the games and movies is massive at this point, and something that there would be no excuse for the world to be anything but an electrifying experience to explore. I'm not talking pointless fetch quests or going off and killing an arbitrary number of mobs for a quest. With so much richness and lore, there is absolutely no reason why every moment in this world can't be something awesome to be savoured. And there's going to be so much to come to life. There's even going to be, think about how many different nations there are. You've got nationalities, you've got ethnicities. We're actually going to see, what does this race of people actually look like? How do they live? Actually, how big are their houses? In the original, there's like 4 or 5 significant mountain ranges that we climb over. Just imagine that. The views from atop this amazing expedition overlooking this awesome fantasy world. The remake could be a world that many gamers find compelling enough to spend hundreds of hours in, while at the same time still having a feeling of purpose and engagement. And that's why I think the remake could prove what most of us blokes had to come to peace with at an early age. The size isn't everything. The amount of spirit you inject into it, that counts, I think. Characters. Oh, this is what I'm positively teeming with excitement to see, is that in Final Fantasy VII, the roster of characters is huge. I mean, even just the party that we have and the main core of characters is huge. And that's also why I'm going to see this as a struggle with Square Enix. Obviously, I'm already falling into the trap. See how easy it happens. I'm now talking about Square. But Final Fantasy VII was chock full of scenes. I mean, just so much. Of course, we got to look at FF15, KH3, things like Left Alive, like various Square Enix projects that have come out late, and it wouldn't be unreasonable to have a concern that with Square Enix often trimming their games a little too short these days, that will Final Fantasy VII Remake have the same treatment? Is it going to get skimmed down? Are scenes going to be minimalistically, and in turn missing the heart and soul and essence of what FF7 had? Again, I really can't emphasize just how many scenes there are, and to think of all of those being done in full cutscenes, no expressions, emotions, actually body movement, interactions. It's why I see it as a struggle, but also why I think it could be a masterpiece in cutscene, cinematic and characterization, because we can't forget that Square Enix, if they are still doing the 3-part, the multi-parter, again they compared it to 13 trilogy, that's 3 full games worth to get this content in. You know, so that's over 120 hours. So they certainly have time and room, and they've even said that they're going to look into exploring other characters. They gave the example of Avalanche. So as much as I want and really hope this is true, it does seem too good to be true almost, that we would get a fully fleshed out FF7 that doesn't miss any of the really important scenes, because the time it took with FF7, the time it took to go into backstory of each character, It was a level of dedication and immersion that certainly other RPGs before had gone into, but with FF7, it was just the way and the heart, and there is just a delicate balance with the way that the scenes were handled. Now, this isn't to say that I think Square Enix should do almost a copy and paste kind of attitude towards its cutscenes, because I definitely don't think that would work. You know, there's a lot of people who said they want like for like, even to the point where the scenes play out and are spoken the same way. I think that would be unnatural and would be odd. Just look at it, the way back in the day, you know, people had to voice what their emotions were. A prime example is when Aerith is... and just imagine this scene, guys. Oh, just feel the ancient richness of the Cetrus city and just the anticipation that's going to be bubbling in your body as you're walking through this fully remade mystical land, knowing what's awaiting, and then just the way that the Aerith scene is going to play, like the emotion. This game has lasted for 20 years and the impact it had, there's a reason so many people were affected the way they were. And while a lot of other people say it's overrated, I've had friends play it almost 15 years since FF7's release, and even some of them were absolutely enthralled by it. People who had never played such an old game found themselves hooked in. So I do think there is a magic about FF7. But going back to the thing with Aerith is, you know, Cloud has to describe how his hands are shaking, how his eyes are burning, how his throat is dry, because we simply couldn't see those things. Now, of course, we don't need that because we're actually going to be able to see that. Of 118 Final Fantasy characters, we have actually only seen character models for barely 15% of that. There's going to be oceans of characters we're going to see first time. What do they look like? Does their voice sound like? And there's both a pro and a con to this, because while scenes will be able to now be more fluid, there will be so much stuff to be communicated, not just through text or even through words. It can be done through visuals. It can be communicated through expression. You know, even eyes. Eyes can tell a story that 1,000 words could not. So there'd be no need for the characters to do it, and they certainly wouldn't need this sort of back and forth. There's a very back and forth kind of flow to the communication. You know, it's now Cloud's turn to speak, now it's Diva's. None of that is needed anymore, and because it could be more free-flowing, that's why the remake could, if done right in this department, could redefine, it could amplify that magic that FF7 the original brought to the table. And I'm going to say I definitely think it's going to be the most difficult. Like, even the more subtle and delicate relationships, like the love triangle between Aerith, Tifa and Cloud, or, you know, how did Barrett really feel about Cloud, and, you know, relationships like that were so much on our guesswork and interpretation. But now we're actually going to see how will Cloud actually look. We will see the look in his eye when he looks at Aerith. And equally, during her final moments, what did Aerith's face look like? Was there some fear? Was there just peace? You know, coming to terms with her fate? Had she come to peace with it? And even like when Cloud lifts his sword against Aerith, was there fear there? Or was there something else? So much context and new meaning to these scenes. So much is going to be redefined by this remake. And that can be magnificent. But what I'm also going to say is, for all of us, because we all came away with a different version of the story and we viewed all these things differently, it's just guaranteed there's going to be some scenes that aren't going to be done the way you felt it was, the way you imagined it, and the way your childhood was formed. Like, there's going to be parts of what you felt about FF7 that are going to be challenged, changed, determined, and sometimes even undermined. Like, there's going to be a scene, whether that's Barrett and Dine, or Under the High Wind, or Barrett and Cloud's date. I mean, that might even happen. You know, so much can happen that I could go, ugh, that's not how I felt. That really, I didn't like that. That I preferred it back in the day. But what I'd implore to people is we have something really unique. We don't have to let the remake decide how we feel about scenes. What I'd implore is, if you do come away from a scene and something didn't sit right with you, you think, that didn't feel how it felt, or how I wanted or imagined it to, is ask yourself, when was the last time you played Final Fantasy VII? Because this is what I'm going to do during the remake when it's out, and it's going to be such a great opportunity for all of us to do, is if something don't sit right, go back and watch that cutscene on YouTube. Go back and re-experience that scene. Even go play the game if you want to, because I can almost guarantee that there's going to be some people playing FF7 that they didn't play it since 1997, or it's certainly been 4 or 5 years since they last played it, and a lot of people's feelings change, and the things we are affected by change as we grow up. The themes, for me, the themes of friendship and fighting for something, fighting for someone else, entrusting others, working as a team. These were, as cheesy as it sounds, something that really helped me when I was young. It was almost like the first experience I had of deeper emotions and bonds between other people. And needless to say, I've met so many more people, and I've lived such a brighter life now than I did as a child, that those scenes may not affect me the same way. And that's the beauty of it. Go watch the original. If something in the remake didn't make you feel right, watch the original. Remember how you felt when you were young when you watched it, and see how you now feel watching it with fresh eyes at this age, because you may just find that a lot of how you feel might not be a reflection on the remake itself, but a reflection in the changes in you. And if not, at the very least, again, if a scene didn't make you feel right in the remake or an aspect of it, you'll get a clearer understanding of why, and you'll say, boom, that's what I liked in the original and that's what that missed, and build up that clearer image. But the beauty of it is, and rounding out finally what the remake can be, and that's a portal to your imagination. Long before this remake got announced, the things that inspired me to relentlessly push and want a remake was always imagination. And there would be little things that would trigger that. Like, it could be so much as a single piece of art that you've fan-made of, like a remade Midgar, or seeing a certain character, or even just playing a completely different game that touched on very similar elements and just sparked my imagination of, oh, how would that look and feel and smell and taste if that was the remake. Sometimes a screenshot was enough to light up all kinds of sparks of imagination. A great one was, I remember Seventh Heaven. There was a picture of the outside of it. You could see the dirty, horrible slums, even the grime-covered plate up above, the fumes, like you could see the smokes and the atmosphere, the grizzled, haggard people who were standing out the front. And you could get this sense of rough and rugged people who are just looking to try to have a good time, escape the monotony and drabness of day-to-day life. And while there was this era of like jubilation and just sort of celebration and people just getting shit-faced, there was still that undertone of sadness and desperation, poverty, and one picture was enough for me to imagine all of that. Now imagine actually walking through that town, actually with the character interacting, Cloud stepping over cans and bumping into things and people. That level of interaction with the world, again, because of Kingdom Hearts 3 and how much the polish. Oh my goodness, the polish on it. Say what you will about KH3, but the interaction with the environment and the way it all played off each other was almost done to an OCD level. It was crazy how much effort Nomura and his team had to put into it, and I can definitely see that same effort getting put into the remake. Maybe some of the same programming, some of the same tricks will just be adjusted and manipulated to the FF7 format. I can definitely see that happening, and what that's going to do is going to bring everything alive. Because you could go through this game criticizing the pacing, the relationship, how that wasn't the same and that wasn't the same and that's not how you remembered it. So many players could go through this game doing nothing but ripping it a new one because it didn't make them feel the right way. And I know this is part of on Square Enix. They're making a remake of some people's most beloved childhood games. This goes into a lot of people's just childhood subconscious childhood memories and the childhood emotions, and that's why there's definitely going to be some people's reactions that are childish, because you're playing with something that is very close and dear to people's hearts. And while some people won't be able to monitor that or turn that into something positive, I think for a lot of us we can, because even if you didn't have the remake, even if you didn't have any of the cutscenes, if some fan had just made a little walking simulator where you got to walk down downtown Midgar, no interaction with the NPCs, just walking around, seeing all the lights, the colours, to such a detail, you can imagine all your five senses and what they'd be experiencing. And with that boost, with that almost a jump starter cable to your imagination, you could then imagine any other scene. You could then imagine, okay, how would the scene then sound or play out, or if I went to this other area, how that would look. And there's so many gaps we can fill in. You could use the remake to give form your imagination of what did that character look like that I'd never seen. Now you have a clear image, you know what that person's voice sounds like, you know the way they move, the way they express, the way the lines in their forehead crease. Let's say the infamous boardroom meeting, you know, when the team are up in the vent and Barrett says Aerith stinks. You could have 90% of your imagination filled in with how the members of that boardroom looked, how they all sat, how the room looked, what the exact colour of the carpet was, but then just because Square Enix, no, let's say they then screw the scene up, it doesn't come across as villainous or threatening, it's very, you know, tepid, even kind of lame, like you feel like they've ruined that scene. Well, the thing is, you've got 90% of the building blocks of what that looked like in your imagination. Just fill in the rest of the scene with how you want it to be, with how you remember it. But again, go back and watch the original and you might find that maybe you're not intimidated by this meeting of Shinra head-ups because, you know, Palmer's just some useless fat, lazy aerospace dude is going to get hit by a truck. Scarlet and Heidegger are just kind of laughing comedic effects by the end, and Rufus is actually kind of a semi-hero who actually helps us in Avid Children towards the end. So that's why you might not feel intimidated, because you know Shinra aren't the real enemy anymore. Back in the day, we thought Shinra were the top. We thought they were the big guns to be feared, until we then realised exactly who and what Sephiroth was, and then they sort of paled. So the remake, finishing off, could be many things. A visual masterpiece, an expression of fantasy like none other we've seen. It could inspire a new generation of console and gamers themselves, a young generation. It could bring back the importance of storytelling, show to Square Enix that leaning into the RPG element, the magic of the storytelling that I would argue founded Square as a company, that can still endure and should be the centerpiece, even in this age of huge AAA games and microtrans and stuffed in multiplayer, VR and other gimmicky mechanics that are obviously forcing just because there's this need to try to hold attention of very short attention gamers. I think the success of Square Enix and Final Fantasy the franchise will never lay in that department. There's just too many other games that are just too easygoing and just too entertaining in a vapidly hollow way that people just find themselves playing it for hundreds of hours and they just don't know why. As tempting as it is to try to play on that, I feel like the remake could be so much more than that, could be so much more than just gameplay, entertainment value. It could be something truly inspiring and yeah, could be used by us more effectively, more as a vehicle to our imagination than something that we wholly rely on Square Enix to pace and produce and replicate exactly as our former childhood selves remember, because that's a tall order and a horrible potential trap to fall in. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how the remake does. Because FF7 the original will always just be one disc pop-in away from replaying. It will still hold however much meaning that it does for you, and nothing is going to change that. Right, there we go, guys. I am done. Thank you so much. Oh, it feels so good to talk about the remake. I was going to break this video up into multiple little segments, but I think I'll leave it as it is here. I just want to finally finish off because it might seem peculiar not to talk about the combat system. No, what could the remake bring in terms of gameplay, as that is what most people play games for. In this department, I'd say this is actually weirdly the most uncertain part of it. We really don't know what the combat system is going to be. We've heard snippets, there might be some cover, there might be some quick switch, you know, they're doing something with materia, but at the end of the day, what we saw in the trailers in 2015, that was almost Square Enix's standard stereotypical copy and paste asset of a combat system. Nothing what I imagine is what we're going to have now. But what could the remake be in terms of the combat system, despite knowing nothing about it? Well, considering if this is going to be 3 games, and how FF15 was Final Fantasy's first main kind of lope into an action combat system. And needless to say, that had flaws, whether that's, you know, just had to press and hold X too much, or the backline control of the bros was really awkward and finicky and didn't play right. We've also heard remake compared to Dissidia-esque sometimes. They might play like Dissidia. Well, in terms of Dissidia NT, the combat system has its faults, has received and garnered a lot of criticism from the larger audience that didn't feel compelling enough for people to queue up and play this game. Then we have Kingdom Hearts 3, closer, better, warmer, enjoyable system. Some complaints again, too much floatiness, not difficult enough for some, or too many overpowered spell effects and event triggers. So the remake is going to be a huge action project for Square across 3 whole games, and therefore the remake could truly define what the rest of the Final Fantasy franchise is going to look like in the future, even Square Enix games as a whole, because if Square are going to compete in the action combat market, then they're going to have to try to come up with something truly unique and innovative, and I don't think Square Enix are there yet. I think they are trying, they are testing out a lot of things, and with 3 games, probably across many years, the remake I can see having a lot of trial and error, a lot of experimentation. Things will be changed. Just look at the 13 trilogy, look how wildly the combat system sometimes changed between iterations of that. Now imagine that for the remake. It could be what defines wholly how Square Enix games play, what they feel like, what the future of the Final Fantasy franchise is going to look like, and just what the gameplay quality and value that Square Enix are capable of. And it will not be ever more starker than with this entry, because you're literally taking a game that was once turn-based and you're now just shifting away from that into action, and every person is going to be comparing it to the turn-based original games. There's going to be no starker a comparison in people's minds being made than with something like this. So it could be argued the remake could also wholly determine what the future of Square Enix as a company, even just as a whole, as their reputation, as what the games feel like, look like, of what they value. Is it coin over characterization? Is it story over side quests? Is it sales over stamping another mark in the legacy of video game history? Either way, I cannot wait to find out. I'll certainly find out at least some portions of it, or trailers of it, here in 2019. Thank you ever so much, guys. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. FF7 Remake fans rise, crawl out of the crevices, and collude non-conclusively in the comment section. Until the next video, goodbye.